Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a video, one of many I'll be making, about what's happening with the protests in the United States and internationally about race and police brutality in the United States. First, I want to talk about what got us here. I think for the first time since the 1950s and 60s, we have a better understanding of the racism in America. Back then, people saw images of the police beating black people, running them over with horses, knocking women down to the ground, and encouraging dogs to attack people. And they also used fire hoses on children, breaking their bones and harming them in ways that can't be described. Even the events that happened since then, that have been caught on camera, can't compare with what we are seeing now. Because right now, it is happening so often and so clearly. There's a feeling of unity and responsibility to put an end to it. For black people, it's like watching all of our experiences coming to life right before our eyes, all at once. When we saw the viral video of a cop killing a man with the same amount of care one uses lighting a cigarette, it was shocking, but it wasn't new. George Floyd was slowly murdered by a cop using all of his body weight to push his knee into another man's neck to stop him from breathing. A man in his 40s laid there, struggling to breathe, so afraid he was calling out for his dead mother, lying there and watching other people around him, trying to convince the cops that he was dying because this cop kept pushing his knee into this man's neck and strangling him to death. And let's not forget, all this time, George Floyd was saying, "I can't breathe," whenever he had enough strength and breath to do so. George Floyd was already handcuffed. He was on his stomach, and he was being held down by other officers. And this was all recorded and clear-cut in front of the crowd and all on video. And the police found no reason to take these cops off the street in a clear-cut case of murder. The cops and prosecutors were still confused about what was seen by millions. What was seen by millions showed that he was killed with no care, with no humanity, and with no dignity. And yet, they were still trying to judge if George Floyd was a man who had a life that mattered. The recording of George Floyd's murder came to light just after another video of a black man who was hunted and killed was recently released. Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old man, was murdered in February the same year, this year, 2020, months before George Floyd. And Ahmaud was killed for just being out jogging. When he was murdered, the cops had nothing to do with it. This time, the cops in Brunswick, Georgia, already had the recording of Ahmaud's murder, not the public, so no one really knew about it, but the murderers and the cops. But because one of the men that helped in the murder of Ahmaud used to be a cop, other cops and people working for the courts had to stay away from the case due to ties with that murderer. When they finally did find someone to handle the case and decide if Ahmaud's life had been taken illegally, the decision was no. No. There was no crime. End of story. They had a video of a father, his son, and a friend that recorded it all, but did nothing to make any arrest until 74 days later. Now, there is always a complicated background to these type of cases, which makes them seem like a rare thing that happened. But people were sharing pictures of Ahmaud dead in the street, being traded and shared on social media. Now, black people have been saying, praying, and taking moments like these into their everyday lives. But yet again, the police and the justice system look differently at the murder with no complexity and decide that Ahmaud was not a black life that mattered. Another unforgettable and unforgivable video that got us to this point is how deadly white power is against black people. White power decides that blacks are not equal. Black power doesn't exist unless a white person recognizes it. We're asked all the time to prove who we are, why we are in certain places, and how we got certain things, simply because we're black, not because possibly we're smart enough to have careers, to make a decent amount of money, and to be able to enjoy life on any level, just as any other person should be able to do. White power often gets black people killed. White power can be used just by saying that you think a white life is in danger from a black person being around is enough to kill a black person. A young man named Christian Cooper, well, not so young perhaps, his late 40s, was in Central Park bird watching. And he was in an area that didn't allow dogs to run around because the habitat of these birds were in the area, and dogs would run through them and destroy the habitat. So when he noticed a dog was running around this habitat without a leash on it, he addressed the owner, Amy Cooper. His name is Christopher Cooper. Her name is Amy Cooper, but they're not related. Seems a pretty simple thing to do. Just take 10 seconds to follow the law, and bird watchers keep the area safe from dogs, destroying an important way to keep nature in balance. But to Amy Cooper, this was not going to happen. For reasons we will never know, her white power kicked in, and she needed to put this black man in his proper place. Maybe she felt it was wrong for any black person to have the right to complain about anything, because in her world, perhaps, blacks should be smiling ear to ear for all the ways white people let them live their lives, as long as they stay away from white people. When her white power kicked in, it went to its ultimate secret level. No time to spend on gaining points or moving around the game board. She went straight and immediately for gold. After all, there is no white power more powerful than in the hands of a white woman in danger from a black monster. This is the boogeyman of white power. The thoughtless, ravenous black that seems to steal the purity of God's most precious of the precious. The black beast that wants nothing more in life but to savagely rape a defenseless white woman over and over again, to make her unclean, to take away her being the chosen of the chosen, so that no good man of God would ever touch her, marry her, love her, or have children with someone who's been so utterly damaged. Amy told Christopher he should be careful, and she would do something about it to show him she had power over the situation. She said openly she would call the police and falsely claim that Christopher was threatening her life and the life of her daughter.
There's an African-American man threatening my life.
Amy Cooper gave this warning because she expected Christopher to be afraid. She thought that Christopher would understand how serious she wanted him to stop recording her. Maybe she thought he was that usual black man that had a reason to fear the police, because in her world, perhaps, all black people break the law, and the law is always around black people because those are the ones
by a man in
who
the rainbow. Please send the cops immediately.
Maybe what never occurred to her was that Christopher was one of those one thing that people refuse to say about black people, that he was an ordinary citizen, an ordinary man. Americans, white Americans especially, have to hyphenate our identity, not because it is very useful for them in understanding our diversity as a nation, but also because it gives them comfort not to be associated with equality. Amy placed her phone call with a false claim of a death threat, and this time it didn't work. Her white power phone call was made with a false claim of a woman faking a panic attack for fear of her life and for the life of her dog. And Christopher waited patiently to reveal the truth. No police arrived, and Christopher went about visiting other areas of the park to enjoy his bird watching. After the video went viral, Amy lost her job. She's apologized. She has said that she is not a racist. She can't explain why she was thinking the way she was at that moment. But I think Amy was thinking she understood her whiteness could take the life of a black man for doing something as little as asking her to obey the rules. Oh yeah, and the dog went into temporary custody at a shelter. People think because Christopher's life was not taken, the story does not need any attention. I believe that the reality of her white power makes Amy Cooper the perfect example in explaining why and how white power is not seen as white supremacy in America. She was willing to watch cops come and arrest, harm, detain, or even kill Christopher, a black man, in front of her eyes, just because she didn't like being told to follow the rules, or even simply being asked. She was empowered because she would pay no price for whatever happened to him next. Christopher understood his worth, his dignity, and he stood his ground. So many people believe that this incident between Amy Cooper, a white woman, and Christopher Cooper a black man, was a great example of how something could have gone wrong so terribly, but ended with a happy ending. But Christopher knows that every day he leaves home, just as every black male knows when he leaves his home in America, that he might encounter acts of hatred just because of the color of his skin. And no matter what he does for a living, no matter how well he lives his life, he knows that someone's always going to challenge him just because of the color of his skin. But he will continue to be a man because he knows that his life matters. So once again to you all who are able to participate in this protest, I'd like to say thank you. You are real heroes. You're the ones making a difference. And your actions are supported around the world by people who admire you for not giving up or for giving in. Please continue to protest and don't be afraid to do so with passion. The passionate protests are working. We know the police are the ones making the problems and starting the escalation which leads to the rioting. We also have proof that several police officers are working together with the white militia and white hate groups to escalate conditions that turn peaceful demonstrations into riots. The greatest part of all this is that now this has become an international issue. There is no one voice to attack, to make this go away, to make it an illegitimate cause, and to prove that things can't be done without violence. Behind the protests is a great amount of organization by well-intended people, lawyers, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons. And a lot of these people for the first time are white people who now recognize that we as black people have been telling the truth for hundreds of years. The American government has the throne of power. But right now, that throne belongs to someone who is against us being Americans. He sits on the throne and he gets an F- in leadership, an F- in responsibility, an F- in reading and comprehension. The throne will have no say from this point on. He's useless. He's useless to us, and he has been since his first day in office. You're beautiful, you're passionate, and your protest have put the throne of power behind bigger, stronger fences. The person expected to lead the world is no more than a coward that now has no place to go but to the safety of a bunker that protects his white power from the power of the people. Let's continue to work on these solutions. What we want ended right now, and also be the owners of our own communication. Tell the press you don't want change. You want it to stop. Let the world know you won't be fooled by officers that take a knee with you or march with you. Let the world know the police are not wanted until they end certain things immediately, and not when it's convenient for them. These police are faking their solidarity with us. Because as long as they can still wear their military gear and their loaded, lethal military weapons, they are not on our side. And they're not there to protect and serve us. They want to stop the protest. But we want to stop the need for any protest. And that's a bigger thing. I'll be making about 7 of these videos, hopefully in a little warmer weather, and talk about the wonderful actions that I feel very proud about that I see, and also what I think about how this is all progressing from the viewpoint of a black man who lives in Sweden but grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I think the next one I'll do will be about the untold violence police use on black women, how they are raped, murdered, and forced into doing horrible things to protect themselves and their children. We also need a closer understanding of how white women have shaped the story around why they kill black men and are often able to keep their jobs or hugged by a judge once they are sentenced or murdered. Right now, police and politicians are working on words, the language that they will tell the press to use to stop this movement from getting anywhere. I will discuss the ways we should demand certain words be used and how to stop them from using words that only matter to them, and how we have to become our own press so that the white privileged owned news agencies will not be allowed to get responses until they admit their language and their words will not be used in our conversations to turn the violence and confusion into something we're not looking for. I'm doing this because I care. I'm a high-risk person for being out in crowds with COVID, so I can't do it myself. But I love what I'm seeing internationally. And I want to see this movement turn into something very positive. And if for nothing else, I want Europeans, I want my friends to know that the true lives of so many diverse people and black people are completely different from what they see on the cop shows, on the massive amount of movies where we're spoon-fed authority, and how it got us to a point where we no longer care for another person's life because we would rather respect authority than respect justice. So that's it. I'm going to drink some whiskey with some tea in it. And I wish you all a good day. And please be safe during your passionate protest.